We welcome to the stage Holocaust survivor and museum volunteer, Helena Yasharoff Peabody, to open tonight's program.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening to see the award-winning documentary For Sama. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum is home to many stories of survival. I have been sharing my story with the public for many years. Every time I share my story, I pay tribute to my mother, Olga Littman, who saved my sister and me. I was 6 years old when living in Poland when World War II started. My father was arrested by the Russians who occupied the part of Poland we were living in at that time. My mother, sister, and I were forced from our home. Then the Germans took over, and the three of us were sent to the rural town and ghetto of Tuzla, where we endured horrible living conditions, constant fear of death. We escaped Tuzla because of my mother's ingenuity and daring to purchase false identification papers from a priest. And when our Jewish identities were discovered by a German who was going to turn us over to the Gestapo, my mother managed to convince him to let us go and try our luck. Her courage and resolve helped us survive the remainder of the war living in Yaroslavl, pretending to be Catholic. We were always worried that our true identities would be exposed. During the last days of the war, we survived a bomb attack on our town right before liberation. My mother protected us through unimaginable terror. She did everything in her power to save us and keep our family alive and together. I wish she would have lived long enough to meet my and my sister's children and grandchildren. She would have been so proud. The museum is a place where my story and those of other Holocaust survivors is safeguarded. It also provides an opportunity to educate about this tragic period of our history. Together, we hope to ensure that the horrors we experienced during the Holocaust are remembered. The museum is also a place where we learn about present-day genocides and other mass atrocities. Tonight, we will see the atrocity unfolding in Syria through the eyes and lens of filmmaker, wife, and mother Waad al-Kateab. She single-handedly documented the terror that befell Aleppo with her camera to ensure that the truth wasn't buried under the rubble, but instead was shown to the world to bear witness. This film is Waad's love letter to her daughter, Sama, and it presents an intimate journey into her personal experience of war. Waad, like my mother, did everything in her power to keep her family together against all odds. It is an honor to invite you now to watch For Sama and join the panel discussion that will immediately follow. Thank you.
I'm the executive producer of the PBS series Frontline. I'm so pleased to be here tonight. What an honor to have a screening in such a remarkable place. Thank you for joining us for this really special presentation of For Sama. As you're likely feeling now, this documentary is transporting. It's a deeply moving experience, an intimate and unforgettable journey that places you at the heart of one of the most tragic conflicts of our time. Frontline and PBS could not be prouder to co-present such a film in partnership with the Holocaust Memorial Museum. Our documentary series and the museum have made extensive efforts to inform and engage the public about the stark realities that Syrians face on a daily basis. Frontline has indeed produced more than a dozen documentaries related to the conflict in Syria. The museum has also produced engrossing digital content and exhibitions such as Please Don't Forget Us, a deeply moving presentation that acknowledges how each life is meaningful and priceless. In joining forces with the museum for today's screening and discussion of For Sama, we are together working to inform and educate the public about the devastating and ongoing consequences of the conflict in Syria. To date, For Sama, as you know, has received global critical acclaim, audience accolades, and numerous awards. More importantly, we believe it transcends any and all boundaries, whether that be of language, country borders, ethnicity, and even culture. This film serves as both a devastating and yet beautiful reminder of the fragility and preciousness of life. For further reflection and discussion, please now join me in welcoming Naomi Kickler, Director of the Simon Scott Center for the Prevention of Genocide. Thank you so much, Naomi. As well as filmmaker Waad al-Kateab. You know who they are. Thank you so much.
Introduce the British.
Thank you so much. Just want to start by congratulating the remarkable filmmakers for this incredibly moving and powerful film and testament to the experience of the Syrian people that you have made. I want to thank Halina and the other survivors who are here tonight, who stand in solidarity with the Syrian people who have experienced horrific atrocities. I also want to recognize our Syrian partners who are in the room and colleagues, including those from Aleppo who are here and who have had to live through the realities that we have seen in this incredibly remarkable film. It's been an honor to work with so many of you. I wish tonight that we didn't have to be here. I wish that for the next 30 minutes we didn't have to talk about something that is still tragically going on. But the reality is it's 3 a.m. today in Syria, and right now there are 3 million people living in Idlib province who are at risk of aerial bombardment and attacks by ground forces. There are 192,000 people who had to flee their homes in the last week alone in northeast Syria, who today, with news of ceasefire, don't know if they're going to be able to return home, when, if at all. There are doctors, teachers, journalists who've been living in parts of Syria that up until the past few days were under non-regime control, who today don't know if they will be arrested, detained, or forcibly conscripted. There are 12,000 people living in a makeshift camp called Rukban who don't know if they're going to get food, medicine, water, and if they'll be attacked by militias. There are also over 100,000 people today who are in detention, whose families do not know where they are, what has happened to them, whether they're alive or whether they're being tortured. That is Syria today. When we were working with Frontline and PBS and the filmmakers to show this film, we wanted to make sure that people did not forget that today people are facing atrocities in Syria. And though for this past week it's been in the news, the thing that so often is missing is the stories about average people and the lives and the challenges that they face at the hands of a regime and others who are committing these crimes. So it is an incredible honor to be able to work and show this story, which puts a face on the experience. I wanted to start with you and a question. This film is 5 years of footage. When did you decide that you wanted to make this into a film, and why did you want to tell the story?
Thank you very much for being here, and it's a very honor for all of us to show the film here. Through these 5 years, when I was shooting all this material, I've never planned about a big film or how I will do this. I worked before some at the news and some as short documentaries or some small stories. But I've never did something personal or speaks about the whole story, because even when I was shooting this, I've never thought that I will be survived to do this. I always was just okay, capture all this material, keep them, and try to protect them as much as I can, in the hope that one day someone outside will take this material and do a film. So right after we left Aleppo, the last, you've seen in the film when we left, after this, I went to Turkey, and from Turkey to London, where I met Ed, and we started speaking together about the film.
And this focus on the experiences of women, children in the film, how did that come out as being one of the key themes?
I wasn't planned to do this, but as a female perspective, I live my life as a woman and then as a mother. So during all the shooting, without any plan, I was following most of the children and the women around us. And they were all over. So I was just looking at the things where I feel that it's interest me and it's present my situation too. So following Afra and her family and many other women. And then the experience that I lived through as like being pregnant and then a mother, it was all the time something stuck in my mind. So when we met and we started speak about what possibility of the film, but because also I have a huge archive, we had like thousands of questions about how it would be. Is it about the city? Is it about some specific stories I follow? Or it's about mixed between my story and something else? Or the hospital also was so big part. So during the conversation, it was so clear that I am presenting part of the woman experience in Aleppo. So we've just started to do this.
Ed, what did you think when you saw the footage? 5 years of this experience.
Yeah, I'll never forget the first time when Waad and I sat together and she did me the honor of like welcome me into these amazing people's lives and into this extraordinary archive. As she said, we had over 500 hours of material that she gathered. And when we started going through it, I mean, I've made a lot of documentaries and watched a lot of documentaries, but pretty much from that first hour, I thought this is the most extraordinary archive of documentary footage that I think has ever existed, because what Waad and what you've seen in the film, and there's so much more that obviously we couldn't include, but what you see is that not only had she lived through this experience and captured all the horror and the suffering that we know happens in war, but she captured the beautiful parts of the human spirit as well. The humor, the jokes, the love, the life was pouring out of all of the stuff that she'd filmed. It was extraordinary, really. And I was just overwhelmed emotionally, but also just thinking, oh my God, how can we make this as good as it needs to be? You know, normally you make a film and you're like, how good is this going to be? How high will this fly? With this, it was like, this has to be this great. And if it's anything underneath, then we failed. So it's just a real sense of responsibility to do justice to these amazing people.
So I can see this, but Ed has got tears in his eyes because it has touched you so deeply because the footage, the stories are so incredibly powerful. You mentioned other films that you've made. You've made films about ISIS. Can you talk a little bit about why you thought it was so important to tell this story? We as an institution believe that if more people had known about the Holocaust, we have these sense that someone would have done something. Yet unfortunately, history doesn't always show that that's true. So for you, what was the purpose?
Well, you know, I'm feeling so emotional right now because while you guys were watching the film, I went to the new exhibit here about, like, what did Americans know about the Holocaust? And it is incredible. If anyone hasn't seen it, I really recommend you go, because it's just so disturbing to me to see actually how much we did know about the Holocaust. And, you know, even when Jews were being persecuted in the early days, we closed the doors, you know, and I count Britain in amongst it here. We did not take refugees in. You know, our priority was our national priorities as opposed to people suffering far away. And then when we did know that atrocities were being committed, we did not act in order to prevent them. And I was just so blown away, I guess, by feeling parallels with my own country's actions in relation to what has happened in Syria. And this film is so important because I think we just got to understand we live in a world where it's not the case that something terrible can happen to those people over here and we're over here and we're fine. You know, oh, it's terrible, they're suffering there, but we're here and, you know, it's a shame, but we'll carry on with our lives. Like, if you think about Syria, if you think about the refugee crisis and the rise of ISIS and the impact that's had on my society, you know, and yours, that is all caused by our failure to do more. I know it's difficult. You say this in Naomi's amazing book, which is, again, I recommend you read, like, Is the Worst Still to Come? But you say it's so difficult to know what to do when violence is being unleashed in such a way. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try and figure out something to stand with people like these. Rant over.
You know, one of the things that is incredibly well documented has been the attack on medical facilities and medical workers. So there's been over 536 attacks on medical facilities, over 900 medical workers that have been killed since 2011. Remarkable organizations, Physicians for Human Rights, the Syrian American Medical Society, others have been documenting this. Can you talk a little bit about why medical facilities have been attacked and what it was like to work in those conditions as a doctor?
Yeah. The first time I've knew that we as doctors are a target was when 3 university students were treating injuries in Aleppo, and they were kidnapped by al-Assad intelligence, and then few days they found their bodies in their car burned aside the street. After that, I heard from a doctor telling me, like, be aware in working in obvious hospitals, don't make them very obvious because you will be targeted by the regime. And it was very complicated, because people needs to know where the hospital is to come to. You can't just have secret hospital and that's it, nobody knows what is it. And just we need to make it very known location-wise for the people. At the same time, it was the most dangerous thing to do. And basically, what I understand also in 2012, 2013, that the Syrian regime is using the same of the Russian military tactic, which their golden state was killing an enemy's doctor equals 10 times more than killing soldiers. So it just destroy the resilience of the people. And here we're not talking about resilience of another army, we're talking about the resilience of the civilians. So they're using the same tactic everywhere to just kill the resilience of the people. And one of the main cities called Daraya that were sieged for 5 years, and they just surrender when they destroyed the only hospital that they have. One of the doctors there told me, the next day we had around 30 people just lying on the floor. The hospital is completely destroyed. We know that they had fractions. They are we need to do operations on them, but we had nothing to do. So we just urged the regime, please just let us out safe. And then they were displaced. So it just the regime, Syrian regime, and the Russian tactics since 2012.
And what was it like for you to actually just day in and day out have to be going into those environments? I mean, the film shows just how incredibly difficult and challenging the circumstances were. How did you keep your own resilience up during that time?
I think there are two main things. Is when you day after day, and we lost a lot of our friends and people we've seen, witnessed children were killed, women, friends. Anytime, you can't just surrender or turn your back, because then their sacrifice will went just for nothing. And the other thing is such those moments, the baby born that we managed to save his life and his mother, which, by the way, the CPR was completely wrong, if any physicians were here. So. Such those moments will give you just the I wish to go back now to say and stay 10 years there just to save one child. So it just gives you the resilience and the courage and the hope just to stay there forever, just to keep doing this.
So that was the moment when, in the film, I thought, I don't know if I can watch anymore. And then he starts breathing, and I just broke into tears. I mean, it's just that kind of being able to show the immense fear, but also the remarkable aspects of human spirit. I mean, it is truly, I mean, we have watched many films on Syria, and it is just so powerful and searing. And I'm sure there's many of you who also felt that way while watching it. I want to remind the audience that you were given cue cards that you could write questions on. So please do that, and my colleagues will collect them, and we'll hopefully be able to take a few questions. There was another moment in the film, too, where you make the decision, that very difficult decision to kind of stay together as a family. And, you know, as Helena was talking about her mother and the immense resolve to stay together, we can't imagine what it must be like to have been in your shoes. Can you talk to us just a little bit about what was going through your mind? So many Syrians that we work with have families scattered around the world and have had to make very difficult decisions about who stays within the country, who leaves. What were you thinking during that time period?
I would say, like, I think he wished that he can go alone, but it wasn't the case. Like, it's so difficult, really, but at the same time, so simple and so clear for us. This is one of the moments which we didn't really take a seat and let's discuss this and see if we can stay or go or whatever. It was really like 1 second of looking at each other, and we knew that that's what we will do. And the fact that we knew that inside Aleppo there's Salem, Afra, and their kids, there's the hospital staff, who's Hamza, not just one of these doctors, but also he's responsible of them. So just the fact that he knows that he will go inside and any one doctor will make a real difference in that situation. And for me, having the camera, and I know that I have a big responsibility, and any more people who can document everything will happen. It will be like better for all the people. So we knew that we have a big duty and a big job. At the same time, there's like a lot of fears and like thinking about, okay, what if something happened while we're getting in? What if we didn't really reach that moment and we arrived? But also the same thing, until now I've seen my face when we were in, I feel that it's not just worth it. When you see like people how they were carrying Sama and celebrating that we arrived, it feels a lot of like resilience, and even if it's just like a simple, small personal story, but it gives like many people who doesn't know us even like a lot of hope. And I'm glad that we did that, and I'm really happy, and I feel until now if that's happened again, I'm sure I will do it in a very big like heart. So just, I don't know, this is one of the stories which has make me so happy, and like, I don't know, it's still like everything happened still bad and still a lot of horror and still a lot of bad memories. But the whole story is still about a lot of strong people, a lot of great doctors who maybe you haven't seen in the film, but there's a huge amount of people who did a lot of things. The white helmet or the civil defense. Like there's many, many people, the teachers, everyone who did just one simple things, it means a lot in that situation.
Hamza?
So like, just to add to what Waad has said, it's just like the decision that we will stay together as a family, because the only other example we had from siege was for Ghouta, Damascus countryside, and it was sieged for 5 years. So just what went from in my mind, like if I just like left my daughter with my family, and then we'll just be apart for 5 years, she's grow old with her like grandparents, see us on Skype. I think she, like, if she were, like, when she grew up, I hope she would say, like, yeah, it was a good decision that I'll just stay with you, not just seeing you on Skype or so. And it was also just the responsibility that we're not better than any other family of Aleppo. There were thousands of children there. We're not like taking our daughter to the front line or something. It was a city with 300,000 families, 300,000 people living there. So it was just like we're one of those people. Our place is there to be with them, and like this is how we decided.
Incredibly difficult decisions, and I can't imagine having been in the places having to make them. In telling this story, Ed, you know, how has it been received? I know you've taken it to a lot of places like this where members of the public can come and listen, but also to policymakers. You mentioned it was shown at the UN recently. How are governments and others responding to it?
Yeah, it's been incredible because during the process, when the 2-year process that we worked together after Waad had left, when we were having great support from our friends at PBS Frontline, I'd like to point out, many people were saying, like, the world has had enough of Syria. You know, people don't want to hear about it anymore. Everyone's bored of it. There's no right, there's no wrong in this situation. And we were thinking, like, maybe this film that these guys had sacrificed so much for would just be shown a couple of places, go out on Frontline and disappear. And what's been so incredible is the way in which people have been hungry for this film. Like, the film has been to Cannes, it's been to Sheffield in England, it's been to Minneapolis, it's been to Mexico, it's been to South Africa.
Nantucket.
Nantucket. Waad loves Nantucket. It's been 20 miles from the DMZ in the Koreas. Apparently it's in Maui, which, you know, we really want to go to, but we can't. And what's been extraordinary, and we've had a screening in the UN, and we've had screenings in Parliament, and what's been extraordinary is in all these countries around the world, all people, you know, whether they be politicians or policymakers or people who knew nothing about Syria and wandered into the wrong cinema, people have responded and engaged with this story in an incredible way, you know, and it just gives you hope, basically. And it makes you think, like, everyone always says, oh, the public are apathetic, you know, and they don't want to hear about this and they don't want to engage. That is not true. And admittedly, we have the incredible footage that Waad filmed and these two amazing people, which makes it easier to engage. But I think that, you know, what we've seen in the reaction is that people are hungry to understand and to do something, because in the world, in the chaos that it is at the minute, people just want to engage.
And really, I think most of the politician people, when they take any decision or try to do something, it's all through reports and numbers, and they don't have, or they don't want the effort to see really what's happening. It's just like seeing a lot of things from so far. So just the chance of these people to go through this film and this experience and feel that this is their children or this is what they could be, it's give them, I think, a different perspective of what's happening. So until now, we're still pushing with this, with a great help from the Syrian campaign and many other people. So it just gives us a lot of hope that maybe something will be changed. And if we keep pushing that in different ways, through normal audience, through great audience like tonight, and many other lines of the political people or many different places, so that could help at least to keep Syria in the people's mind now and act. Maybe it's too late for what happened with us and too late for Aleppo, but still not too late at all for people in Idlib now or the Kurds now in northeast Syria. So there's many chances for these people if they want to do something, and they can do it right now.
You know, I think for us, when we look at the experience of the Holocaust, there was a man by the name of Jan Karski who came out and told stories of what was happening to Jews that were in ghettos, that were being put into camps. He came to the United States and he met with a Supreme Court Justice, Felix Frankfurter, and the response of the Supreme Court Justice is that I simply can't believe this. He said, it's not that I don't think it's not true, it's just so hard to comprehend. And what your images help to explain, what the images of the Caesar photos that the museum has, images of torture in the Assad detention centers, it helps people understand that this is real. It helps people understand that these are not terrorists. As I mentioned before, the narrative that the government has been putting forward is that they are fighting a war against terrorists. These are children. These are elderly in the photos, in your footage, to give that more human element. And one thing that everyone in the audience can do is the film is going to be shown on PBS Frontline in November. I believe it's November 19th. So please tell your friends, colleagues, spread the word to watch the film. You can also follow them on Twitter to learn more about the film, because I think, as you said, we have to have hope that the more people who know, the more that we can engage our own communities, our own policymakers, when there are moments like right now, to help mobilize attention on Syria and make sure there's the right kind of response.
Yeah, just to say, it's also playing in cinemas in DC, I believe. I don't have the exact date, which is a real mistake, but it's soon. And someone in the audience who's laughing at me now knows. So if you're interested, please tell as many people in the DC community to come and see it as possible.
I wanted to ask, just in that vein, have you had a chance to have the film be seen by any of your friends that are in Idlib? How do people who are still living within various parts of Syria respond to the film?
Like we had 2 screenings, one in Gaziantep for the people who were in the film, most of them, Salem, Afra, their kids, some of the people.
Just very quickly, Gaziantep is in southern Turkey on the border. It's where many people have fled out of.
Yeah. So these people, they've seen the film before it was published. I was like so scared about what they will say and how they will, if there's many feedback and many comments, but it was really brilliant screening and they were so happy with that. And we did also one small screen inside Syria for the people who still, part of them still work in the hospital and part of them moved to other places to work. And it was really so, for all of us, we were so really scared about when we were working on this, Ed was thinking more about you guys, the audience who's from the Western countries, from their perspective, how they've seen Syria. But for me, I was so terrifying and want to make the people who I lived with and they have been at the same experience to feel that, no, this is really what we lived all. And it was just like amazing how it's both were agreed that this is something, yes, this is our story.
I have to ask, Hamza, one of the remarkable benefits that we have all been able to experience as a result, sadly, of the last almost 9 years has been just incredible Syrian doctors that have done remarkable work in Syria and elsewhere. And I'm just wondering, when you think, yeah. Just absolutely incredible. When you think about continuing your work, what does that look like if you look to the future?
I will talk personally and also want to celebrate one of the other Syrian doctors that was with us in Aleppo, Dr. Hussam. He's now in Washington. So both of us, as maybe young doctors, we had no idea about the concept of public health before. I were only always focused to just do our the residency and then just specialized in one field and treating patients. But after being in Aleppo, and I think also about so many other doctors, we start to understand the health system, building the health system is more important just to treat individuals. So I think I will speak for myself and a lot of other Syrians that we're moving toward the public health and health administrative, health system management to one day really building the health system in Syria.
Well, I think we all hope that that will happen very soon, sooner rather than later. And I think that feeds into one of the questions that we have from the audience as well. The question says, do you want to return to Aleppo, Syria as a family? And what must be done for you to be able to go back to live safely?
This is very, emotional question. And of course, yes. And of course, for our plan, we hope and we live for the day when we can be back. And just in this situation, I'm not speaking just about both of us, but about 6 million refugees. And if Assad's still controlling Syria, no one of us could back to be killed again or arrested. So it's really more about the policy in our country, when hoping the governments will agree that this can't be as a president anymore. That will be the day when all of us will be back. As we smuggled back to Aleppo walking, we will be back and hope to start build Syria, as Hamza mentioned.
Just want to add, like, basically, we've risked everything to stay. So 100% we definitely want to get back, but at least to start like to see some of accountability happen, some justice, where then we can like live back to Syria, like, and process what we've been through. But the first step of that is accountability.
And when you say accountability, what do you mean by that?
The main things like the detainees who are in Assad prisons and no one knows about these people. And you mentioned like an exhibition happened here with, I think, 11,000 picture of people who being tortured to death, and still more people who we don't know anything about them. Like, I don't know, one of the main things also the refugees around the world, like 6 million refugees, they can't all be back until they will be, like, it's Assad, actually. It's all about Assad, and it's all about...
Basically, it's just like, why I like just take that deep breath, because it's so many levels like of war crimes that has happened, from the chemical weapon, from displacing people, attacking hospitals, the detainees, the hundreds or even thousands of rape conditions for women in al-Assad prisons, to the, like, it's also difficult, but to the lights one where like the thousands of children who are in this winter now living in camps under the trees. So the people who were responsible for those children to live under the trees year after year after year, like, should be accountable for that. So those children can process that, okay, now we had justice and we will stay in our country. Like, this is not the first step, but this is the only way that Syria can be rebuilt again.
And the photos that were mentioned before, when Caesar brought them here to the museum, we had Ambassador Rapp, the former International Criminal Justice Ambassador for the United States, who said that after the Holocaust, this has been the most documented commission of atrocities that the world has ever seen. So in terms of actually building cases, it will hopefully be possible, and we're seeing some cases move forward in Europe in this regard. Ed, I wanted to ask you a question also. We had a question here. The necessity of bearing witness is an important legacy of the Holocaust. Today, technology and the internet have made sharing information easier than ever, yet the world has largely abandoned the people of Syria. Does bearing witness mean something different today, and is it enough? As a documentary filmmaker, how do you answer that question?
Wow, that's a big question. I think there are multiple layers to that. Maybe I'll try and keep it short. One of the things that's interesting about Syria is, and I think it's an interesting comparison with the Second World War, is the barrage of propaganda, misinformation, and just downright lies that various national governments that have been involved in the conflict have attempted to do in order to distort the truth. I mean, you mentioned the portrayal of peaceful protesters like Waad and Hamza as terrorists, which was happening from the beginning. And I think it's very interesting how, if you go up to most people on the street in this conflict that is supposedly so well documented, most people think it's just between ISIS and the government, and so their sympathies are confused. So I think this technology, this world that we live in, is more vulnerable to distortion. That's how it appears to be, and that's why holding on to the truth, and trying to get to the truth of people like these guys is so important. I think there was also a very interesting thing that when, tragically, Western journalists were killed, and essentially it became impossible for Western journalists to go, we depended on people like Waad, who were living it and right in the heart of it. And yet one of the things I found difficult when watching the news was often people like her, not necessarily her, but their footage was qualified. We've received this from a citizen journalist, and it allegedly shows an airstrike on a civilian area. You're like, well, I don't think they could fake that, And I think that is an important thing that we have to, it's a fantastic thing that now people like Waad, people who are living their stories, are empowered and have the technology to tell their stories, and we in our societies need to start placing the due respect on that, which is what we hope this film will do, is say these guys who are living it and recording it themselves should be carrying the story. They don't need us necessarily. We just support them in whatever way is appropriate.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah. A question. What happened to the other family with the 3 children? Do you mind
So,
sharing that?
Afra and her husband Salim and Wissam Zain and Naya, they live now in Turkey, in Gaziantep, south next to the border. And they both working, the kids at the school. And unfortunately, like you've seen at the news, many cases in Turkey about racism, and the kids are not that happy at the school, but at least like they live now in safety. We hope they have another chance to go out of Turkey.
And there was a second part of the question, which I'll answer. It says, has the White House or Congress viewed the film? Not yet, but many of us are going to work to try to make that happen. So hopefully we can take this to as many places where people need to hear the powerful message that you have. And just for one last question, thank you for this important work. As everyday citizens, we are often helpless to influence policy, let alone the UN Security Council. What can we do to help?
Like the main and the first step you can do, really tell everyone you know about the film, tell them about Syria, about this is not over yet, about there's a lot of massacres still happening every day. Tell them about the film will be shown on BBS next month, and anyone you know, like your neighbor, the people who you met in the metro, in the bus, anyone you can have any chance to spread the word and tell that this is still happening in Syria, that will really help. The next step could be something very simple any one of you can do. If you are a journalist, write about it. If you are a mother, tell your children and let them grow up in the perspective of these people who are so far. They are like us, and we need all to be more open about others. If you are like a teacher, teach your children about or your student about what's happening. It's really maybe all of us have a very good role, and we thought that maybe this is something so small, but all of that will really lead to a very big movement. We are trying to build, impact campaign. It's called Action for Sama. Will follow the film, and we hope that we can build the website soon, so you can follow For Sama Film on social media and keep your eyes on that we hope everyone can do something. Do you want to add, please?
I just wanted to add some hyperbole. This place is a monument to the phrase "never again." You know, that's what this museum is about, and yet it does happen again. And I think that it can seem overwhelming, as the questioner said. You know, we feel helpless, but we're not helpless. You know, what these guys and why this film is so important for us in this world at the moment is these guys prove that courage and love and humanity can withstand, the machinations of tyrants, basically. And whether you're confronting riot police in Hong Kong or whatever your particular struggle is, you can draw inspiration from these two who faced such incredible odds and stuck with it through the end. And if you can just draw that inspiration from them, then maybe we don't have the answers, but I'm confident that we will make the world better than it is at the moment.
Give you your time. Well, just to add small thing about what can everyone do. Basically, now bringing Syria to your mind and to your talk again. It's not over. It's still happening. It's not about ISIS. It's not about terrorists. 2 weeks ago, maybe the Washington Post did a survey with the president runners, which is a new concept for me, that there are many people are maybe elected for running for a president campaign. So you know more about it. And the main question is how open are you to get the relationship with the Syrian regime again? And the three of those people has answered yes, that we're fine, it's happening to some other people, it's not our problem. So as American people, I think those people should be ashamed that you have no problem. That they have no problem to get the relationship back with a war criminal. So whatever I tweet about it, I'm still that Syrian refugee who's tweeting about it, but it's your country, it's your next president, So
Your future.
Your future. So it's your say about this situation. So basically, like asking the Congress, the Parliament member, the White House, like, what's your plan out towards Syria? It's not something that we don't care about anymore. We need to know what's your planning, what's your diplomatic solution, or whatever about this. The final thing that I want to say, sorry, that it's very difficult for me to be in this place, but it means a lot that it really gives me hope that people will not be silent. Like the thing is, you reach to the point that no one anymore can deny the Holocaust. Nobody can talk about that. It's matter of opinion. We don't know really what's going on, but we're still fighting this struggle. Like even in the UK or here in the US, like we don't know who's bad or who's good. We don't know the 100% truth. Maybe al-Assad is the best choice now. We don't know who's going to be the next president. So this place gave me hope that one day we reach to the point that supporting war criminal will not be just like a freedom of mind.
So here at the museum, we have been working to try to, as I said before, put a spotlight on the experience of the Syrian people, and will continue to do so until hopefully we see a peaceful resolution and the atrocities are halted, people are held accountable. I think one of the things that's so remarkable during the Holocaust, within the Warsaw Ghetto, there was a group of people, and they formed a movement called al-Kateab, where they created an archive, basically of what life was like within the ghetto, what life was like for the Jewish people. And there's a really powerful set of writings in that archive because everything is written, where in one case, one of the members wrote, we're crying out for the world. We're crying out for the world to listen and to do something. And with many of the Syrian colleagues that we worked with, our trips to the border, the one common message that everyone has repeated over and over again is, please do not abandon us. We are crying out to the world. And those stark similarities, as you said, are just so hard for us to sit and reckon with. But, when I looked at what al-Kateab collected in their archive, my grandmother was in the Warsaw Ghetto, and it, for me, brought life to understanding what she went through. For your daughters, for your grandchildren, what you have created here is that version of an archive. And yes, hopefully it counters those who try to deny what's happening, those who try to deem you to be terrorists. But the legacy of this work is going to live on for future generations, and you have helped to set a historical record. And hopefully it will also help to advance justice and the creation of a more fair Syria, one in which you're able to go home, our other colleagues here are able to go home, live, thrive, and live in a diverse society. So it's an incredible honor and privilege for us to be able to host you tonight. We want to thank PBS Frontline for all of your remarkable work on this film and support for the film and work with us. I'd like to thank the colleagues from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and the Simon Scott Center for the Prevention of Genocide who have been working both on the case of Syria and also on making tonight's event possible. But most of all, I would like to thank the three of you, Waad, Hamza, and Ed, for your incredibly moving work. I hope that we're all able to help you take this even further and take also the movement that you're trying to bring further. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.